and welcome back to episode 3 of Analyse the Pros. My name is Jambre. Today we have a match between Shaman and Paladin in the HGG between Russia and Austria. Starting with the Paladin's mulligan, and you want to toss it all. You really want to be looking for your 1-drops, particularly going first. Cold Light Seer kind of indicates that it's a more aggressive Paladin, so it's unlikely to be running as much late game or at qualities, for example. For the Shaman, depending on what build it is, you definitely want to be keeping claws no matter what, but keeping Volcano is fine if you're not running a lot of 1-drops. If you are running 1-drops, I'd advocate tossing the rest and trying to find them, but it could be a situation where you know your deck and you're inevitably going to lose the board, so you need that Volcano as a catch-up tool.
With the Shaman up against the Paladin coming back from the other side, and in case you're curious, that's not because Standard actually has like a lucky pair of trousers or something. His name literally means magic pants.
Great.
Yeah.
We're seeing from Austria's side the first, I think, truly aggressive Paladin that we've seen today. We've got the Cold Light Seer, which, unless things have changed dramatically, that card does indicate a pure aggressive Paladin.
Yeah, I was, during my week off, Raven was talking to me about this, what we did while you guys were handling it last week. I did watch an awful lot of EU versus CN as well as watching you guys, and was enjoying, of course, the wonderful commentary duo of Firebat and Zalay. And Firebat is a man very close to my heart. We tend to agree on things like this, and he was making a comment about how people are now building these Paladin decks to try and do everything, whereas Firebat is a very big fan of building a deck to do one thing and mathematically optimizing its chances to do that one thing. I 100% agree with that stance, and I think... I'm not sure if it was the game I was casting with you where I was talking about had this very aggressive start. And
For the Paladin's turn 2, I'd advocate playing the Galactic Crawler here. You don't want to play Hydrologist because it plays far too into J-Claws. Your opponent has kept 2 cards in the mulligan and not played anything on turn 1, so J-Claws is fairly likely at this point. So having the 2-3 body on the board plays around that a little bit.
And suddenly it was Stonehill Defender hero power on turn 5.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of just the all-in aggression or the all-in control when it comes to Paladin. I think either of those are fine. I think the middle ground deck is, Toolbox Paladin, if you want to call it that, where it just has a bit of everything in there, can sometimes just come unstuck in a lot of situations.
Speaking of a bit of everything, this is not the first Galactic Crawler.
For Shaman's turn 2, J-Claws and hitting the crab is an attractive option. You don't want the Paladin's board to get out of control, and the 1-1 contest the 2-1 crab that will be left over. Additionally, if your opponent were to ignore your board and go face, you have a punish with Maelstrom Portal, and you don't really have any 4-cost cards that you want to be coining out next turn, so overloading now is a very good turn to do so.
We've seen today, and it's not the first Galactic Crawler we've seen with no targets today either. Unfortunately, Zegentag not getting the matchup that he wanted for this card, but it's still a 2-3 for 2 mana. He's obviously decided that it's better to drop this than the Hydrologist this turn.
Yeah, I think Hydrologist he wants to stick around since it's the only Murloc he has in his hand right now to pair with that Seer. So he doesn't just want to drop it onto turn 2 and have Standard say, alright, sweet, J-Claws, let's go. Then suddenly he's got no Murlocs left in his hand and he's got a very sad Cold Light Seer sat around doing nothing. So he wants to test for J-Claws, he wants to just stick one toe in the water and figure out what Standard has going on in terms of A, what his Shaman deck looks like, B, whether there is a threat of things like J-Claws, and then move forward from there with the Murloc synergies as and when they come later on.
Yep, he's going to have to make that happen at some point later. We can see Wicked Flame Burn Bristle, that works as a 3-drop, but still it isn't a Murloc, so he may have to wait a little while before he creates the board where Cold Light Seer becomes worthwhile, but he is going to want it sooner rather than later. Grimescale Chum, another card that indicates a very aggressive Murloc Paladin deck.
Yeah, turns awkward though, as you mentioned. Burn Bristle does protect this 2-1 and allows it to keep pushing. You're very exposed to Maelstrom Portal if you go with the Wicker Flame line.
On to Paladin's turn 3, and they have a few options. They could play Wicker Flame Burn Bristle, they could play 2 Murlocs in the form of Chum and Hydrologist, or they could just play Hydrologist and a Secret. I'll go through each play now and we'll determine which one's the best. Starting with Wicker Flame Burn Bristle. For a 3-drop, it doesn't actually have any more effective stats than the other plays we could do this turn. Your opponent could either attack into it and leave a 2-2, or Maelstrom, attack into it, completely clearing it. which is the same kind of weaknesses as the other plays. You usually want to be playing on curve in Hearthstone. It means when you need a flexible turn, you have those tools available to maximise your mana. The problem with playing Burn Bristle now is you don't get to utilise the taunt. At this stage of the game, the shaman's trying to clear every minion you have, so effectively they all have taunt, so you don't get to use the taunt later down the line to protect a minion, for example. Additionally, it's not a Murloc, and we already have Murloc synergies in hand, and we could potentially draw them next turn, so you can't really snowball the board as hard by playing this card. And although we're like playing on curve, we're not really maximising our chances to really pull ahead. Playing Hydrologist, you have a 90% chance of getting either Noble Sacrifice or Redemption, which are both great against the Jade Claws right now. Additionally, you get immediate value out of both those secrets, because you know your opponent's going to be attacking with the Jade Claws next turn. So it makes sense to play the secret now where you can get value from it, whereas saving it and playing on another turn, it might take a few turns for you to actually get the tempo advantage from that card. Additionally, your next turn looks very good with Charm plus Seer, immediately getting the buff out of it and buffing up your Hydrologist, which is fairly likely to survive for this next turn. And then you have a nice wide Murloc board, which you can potentially snowball even further with things like Megasaur or War Leader. Compared to Chum and Hydrologist, you lose out on the immediate minion next turn, but you secure your board against things like Maelstrom Portal, which your opponent could have. He's still got a card they kept in the mulligan alongside J-Claws, which makes sense to be Maelstrom. And you get the immediate value out of that secret, which could potentially take a while to take effect. And you get the guaranteed buff next turn of the Charm plus Seer to make a big board. Losing out on the immediate minion doesn't matter too much for board trades. Your opponent's overloaded on turn 3. They're not going to be developing that many minions or threats that you need to deal with immediately. So I think the best play here is just to play the Hydrologist and hope for Noble Sacrifice or Redemption and go from there. In terms of what to do with this crab, I think trading into the 1-1 is the best option. The 1-1's a good trigger for Redemption or Noble Sacrifice. And you don't really want to bring back a crab, you want to bring back Murlocs for your additional Murloc synergy. And by leaving the 2-1 crab up, you open yourself up to Maelstrom Portal a bit more, which is something you don't really want to do at this stage in exchange for 2 face damage.
But otherwise, like it's one of those plays where, like, okay, I can play Wicker Flame and get punished by Maelstrom Portal, but the alternative is that there's just a miserable trade on the board happening anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it's a play with possible upside and a world where the downside only puts you back pretty much in the same spot, whereas if you hadn't played it.
Wonder if he ever considers the trade here. It makes his board slightly better against the Maelstrom Portal. Looks like he's going for it. Because that Maelstrom Portal, it still clears. No, it still clears the entire board. Maybe it's no different.
Yeah, it means there is a difference. The difference is the 1-1. The 1-1 would still be alive if he didn't trade. I'm just not entirely sure how relevant that 1-1 is in terms of pushing 2 damage when you are clearly the aggressive deck in this matchup. I mean, your hand has a Grimscale Chum in it. You're pretty certainly playing the aggressor.
For the Shaman, coining out the Mana Tide here is a very attractive option. It doesn't die immediately on board, so your opponent Paladin has to invest further resources if they want to kill it off immediately. Additionally, you will be drawing faster into your potentially good turn 4s in Jade Spirit or Jade Lightning. If you don't draw them, you can Maelstrom Portal Hero Power, further reducing your thing from below again, which is very good. So there's a lot of reasons to play this Mana Tide now, and it's a very attractive term.
Also, if taking Maelstrom Portal aside for a moment, according to this board, Standard actually can't deal with the Wicker Flame, whereas if he left the 1-1 there, obviously it was just a case of trading twice. So I guess he's opting to protect his Wicker Flame Burn Bristle rather than protecting the Galactic Crawler. Stanodachi now going to just go ahead and drop Mana Tide Totem, start drawing some cards.
It's fair. Mana Tide is going to pick up Lightning Storm, but the True Silver Champion is here to answer it, which is important.
Okay, so a lot of people will have a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I must kill this Mana Tide, I don't want the Shaman to draw cards, let's True Silver it now and get it done with. I think it's a mistake, and let's explore why. Looking at our own game plan, we want to be getting these Murlocs on board and buffing them with Megasaur. The problem with delaying it is, A, we don't put any pressure on the opponent, and it makes us hard to control the opponent's side of the board by not developing a board of our own, and B, As it gets to the later stages of the game, when we're developing boards, they become a lot more weak to AoE, so it makes sense to try and snowball them now before the shaman has that option available. For shamans turn 4, they don't really have any ways of actually protecting this mana tide totem, so if we were to develop our own side of the board and bump into it, we would be able to get the free kill next turn no problem. By using the True Silver now, we only leave a 2-2 on board, which means we probably have to use the second charge of True Silver to deal with whatever the opponent plays onto turn 4. At this stage of the game, you want to be using your minions to value trade into the opponents to gain an advantage and not use your resources like True Silver too early. The best time to play True Silver Champion is in the mid to late game against minions that you can't actually value trade into, like Thing from Below or the bigger Jades. You could also use it when your board's very weak to AoE and you don't want to put additional resources onto the board. If you use the True Silver now, you only have a 2-2 on board, and you become incredibly weak to things like Maelstrom Portal, and where your opponent can develop small minions which are not too happy with clearing with your True Silver. Also, a lot of shamans play Bloodcell Corsair, which is also a very large beat in this situation. So I think the best play here is to play the Charm and the Seer, giving yourself a nice healthy Murloc board which you can potentially buff with the Megasaur. You can bump into the Mana Tide, leaving it as a 0-1, and you'll be almost guaranteed to kill it next turn for free. Yes, you give your opponent one additional card, but by hampering your own strategy, you're giving your opponent a totally different advantage that is way bigger than that card could have ever provided.
Talked about in the previous series the usage of Mana Tide Totem to disrupt your opponent's turns, which is what Stan and Russia are trying to do here, and then the ability to be able to answer Mana Tide Totem yourself if that comes out, which Austria were well prepared to do with the True Silver.
Maelstrom Portal totem here is very nice. It completely clears the board and doesn't give an attractive target for True Silver, and it also reduces the cost of your Thing from Below, something you want to be doing when you have cards like Volcano in hand, so you potentially have a big swing turn later on with Volcano paired with the Thing. They're unlikely to use the True Silver on one of your small minions or totem, so it also opens up the way for a turn 5 Harrison Jones, which is unlikely to get much value elsewhere in this matchup.
Now Stan Udachi just having to totem up Maelstrom Portal and deal with the board. Not wanting to waste the Jinyu Water Speaker yet, especially as he doesn't know quite what sort of paladin that he's against. The the Tentacle of N'Zoth not going to serve Stan Udachi too well.
Well, I wonder, because there aren't too many 1-drops that would have come out here that demanded that True Silver Champion being used this turn.
Turn 5 from the Paladin, and we're kind of forced to play catch up now, which is something we're not wanting to do on turn 5 as the aggressive deck. The best way to do this is probably Stonehill Defender, who trades nicely with the 2/1/1s on board. Developing the Murlocs this turn is not very mana efficient, and they're also weak to the AoE effect of this Death Fractal.
Whereas Tentacle of N'Zoth is something that you do kind of want to just get killed so that it doesn't interact with the board later. So I wonder whether that might actually even be a positive for Stan Udachi.
Stonehill Defender and Hydrologist look like the cards that Sakantag is considering. Gentle Megasaur not going to happen this turn. Grimescale Chum could be considered, but he really wants to get all of these Murlocs off together a little bit later on.
He does, and he's suffering here from the slow start, right? And this is the downside. Like when I'm talking about this.
For the options here, Thespian's pretty low value, and by the time you want to play it, it's going to be too weak to AoE effects or board trades from the opponent. So it's probably only between Bog Creeper and Sen'jin. The problem with Bog Creeper is that it costs 7 mana. It can be hard to play this card and do anything else really with your turn. Additionally, it's very weak to Hex, which your opponent is almost guaranteed to be playing 2 of. I think I like Sen'jin the most. The 5 health on it means it's outside of range like Jade Lightning or Lightning Storm from the opponent, and the 4 mana cost means it's the most flexible of the cards.
Kind of fire that debate about whether you build your deck flexibly or whether you build it to do one thing specifically. The more flexible your deck is, the more you're able to recover from positions like this, right? Whereas
Hero powering here I think is actually quite a large blunder. It just dies to the AoE immediately. If you play Hydrologist, it's pretty likely to survive as a 2-1, and next turn you can follow up with 2 Murlocs, and you have the 2 mana remaining to either play a secret, hero power, or play a top deck. Yes, you miss out on the immediate guaranteed value of playing all 3 Murlocs together, but if you look at the situation, it's pretty unlikely that your Hydrologist is going to die, and just this hero power here is just sacrificing itself to the AoE effect of this death rattle.
You try and mathematically maximize your opportunity to play a Murloc on 1 and just snowball from there to the rest of the game.
For Shaman's turn 5, it's pretty clear Harrison Jones is likely not to get any better than this, as there's probably only 1 weapon remaining in the opponent's deck, and the other options you have this turn aren't too appealing anyway. You want to trade in your minions first to not damage your Harrison from this AoE.
Yes, you do that one thing more often, but the games where that one thing doesn't happen, it's much, much harder to recover because your deck isn't able to adapt as well.
Sure, if you just whiff one turn and you end up playing some sort of control game, you just can't win against any sort of mid-range or control-y deck. Harrison Jones just helped Showdown a lot, getting rid of a true silver champion charge, drawing a card.
For Paladin's turn 6, Kings feels pretty bad, so I think you want to just try and spam the board with Murlocs and hopefully have something stick for a Megasaur next turn. Depending on which order you play the Chum and the Hydrologist, you can end up with a 3-5 and a 2-3, or a 2-4 and a 3-4. Given that they all die in one shot to Harrison Jones, I think I prefer the 2-4 health creatures, so you play around things like Lightning Storm a bit better.
That's a pretty nice swing there.
It is, and doubly punished really for not using the true silver champion. I said there might be a debate in terms of the Tentacle of N'Zoth as to whether he wanted to clear it so it didn't start to mess with his board too much. He chose not to, and then not only was that Tentacle able to detonate his 1-1 from behind the taunt, but holding on to the true silver also got punished by that Harrison Jones, which is a card that we just see every single time in Shaman.
For secrets, obviously Eye for an Eye is unplayable, so it's only really between Noble Sacrifice and Getaway Kodo. The problem with Kodo is that you're not going to play the secret this turn, so your taunt's going to die and you're not going to really have a good target for it. Noble Sacrifice is potentially very good next turn. If this Harrison Jones has to kill this 1-1, it means next turn you can use the Noble Sacrifice to protect your Murlocs, and you don't actually have to kill off the Harrison Jones.
This deck always has a Harrison in it.
It does seem to nowadays, doesn't it? It seems to be the weapon removal of choice rather than the Volatile Ooze, which is more common.
Volatile Ooze?
Volatile Ooze?
Where did that come from?
Volatile? No. Which one is it?
Gluttonous.
Gluttonous!
Yeah. I'm just wondering where you even got the word volatile
I think I went from volcanic to volatile somehow,
Interesting.
thinking of potions. Anywho.
From the Shaman's perspective, you want to really clear these Murlocs so there's no potential for Megasaur or War Leader, and using Storm this turn is a good way to do so. I think the best way to do it is to start with a Storm. If you roll high on both the 3 health creatures, which happens 1 in 4 times, you can then just play the Mana Tide Totem. If not, you can use the Maelstrom Portal to clean up and guarantee you clear the whole board. You'll be overloaded 2 for the next turn, which will be fine. You'll have 5 mana, so you can develop Mana Tide Totem Hero Power, or just Hero Power Thing from below.
Called it that earlier. Raven didn't pick me up on it.
Shaman always has struggled for card draw, though, which I think is part of the reason. We saw, I think, Farsight coming out, for example, trying to find a solution to this card draw issue, because Mana Tides aren't reliable, right? So I think Shaman, for the most part, would rather have the potential of a bit of extra card draw over the potential of a bit of extra armor gain, when they already have such resilient healing already with Jinyus and Hot Spring Guardians.
Right. A few twos there, rolled from the Lightning Storm, but not to worry. Maelstrom Portal finishes that up, and yeah, that's not a bad one-drop. I feel like it's not one you see very often.
For the Paladin, nothing feels great, but Bog Creeper is the only one which has the potential to survive, and it's the most expensive, so it's probably the best time to play it.
The Maelstrom Portal. That's statistically incorrect, because
I was going to say,
you get
I'm
them
willing
all,
to
same
bet
often.
you see it exactly as much as any other one-drop.
But it's one of those that when you do see it, it can have quite a big effect. We could get a Tyrion out of this thing. Yeah, we could.
The Shaman's turn 7, and we have actually quite an interesting turn. You could trade the 1-1 into the 6-8 and potentially look for a way to deal with this Bog Creeper, but realistically from a Paladin deck the only other answer is a second True Silver, and even that's not too great, as you have to trade off your entire board, not developing anything of your own, and all you have is a True Silver with a fairly expensive hand behind it. The play I actually like, and I'll explain why, is Mana Tide Hero Power. Firstly, we reduce our thing from below by 2, making it cost 2 mana, which opens up the way for a potential volcano swing turn in the future. Secondly, we will be drawing cards off Mana Tide, so we can draw things like Hex as a potential answer for this Bog Creeper, or Jade Lightning if they were to trade into our 5-1. If we play Mana Tide Hero Power, we'd be left with a Mana Tide, a random totem, a 1-1 and a 5-1. This board might look like it's weak to Consecration, but if the opponent were to Consecration next turn, they'd only have 4 mana remaining to develop a threat alongside it. This means that on turn 8, we can play Volcano, Hero Power, and Thing from Below all in the same turn, completely clearing their board and developing a board of our own, and we'd be overloaded for 2 mana, and we can follow up the next turn with something like Eye of Blackpaw, or something like Removal if we were to draw it. If the Paladin were to take this play as thinking we have no way to deal with this Bog Creeper and put like a Steed or a Kings on it, we could either use Volcano, or we could devolve it and use the board to trade away. So with this play we kind of have all bases covered really. By spreading wide onto the board, we're exploiting the fact that this Bog Creeper can only attack into 1 minion at a time. Our health total is fine at 23 at this point. We're also setting up a potentially huge swing turn with the Volcano and Thing from Below, which is going to gain us massive board control and is likely going to snowball into a victory.
Devolve pickup. Bogchamp hits the board, and there isn't a crispy looking answer to it. War Leader isn't the best in the world. 3 mana, 3/3 is about all that's going to happen on that front for Standardachi and this Shaman, but still, it's an extra resource in hand. It's Maelstrom Portal did a job, summoned a minion, which is, already the potential to create a 2-for-1 situation. And when that minion then death rattles into another minion, that's when you are really starting to get down the valueception rabbit hole.
I agree with you. I don't think it particularly matters that it's just a 3 mana, 3/3.
Just a card.
It might just fit the curve at some point, like right now,
yeah.
and end up being just as helpful. He's got enough late game stuff.
Stan attacks into the Bog Creeper to find a 3/3 Murloc, which he plays. He then attacks the 5/1 into the Bog Creeper preemptively, trying to set up the trade with a 3/3 into the 6/2. The problem with this play is that you're now weak to Spikeridge Steed and True Silver Champion number 2, and you don't have great ways to deal with their board afterwards. By not attacking in, you're a little bit weaker to Consecration, but it's not really a punish in this scenario. Our 3 Murloc will survive the Consecration, and then we'll be able to swing back with a Volcano ourselves, clearing their board and putting us ahead. By not attacking in, if our opponent were to play a card like Spikeridge Steed or Kings for example, we can punish them with Devolve, and our 5/1 is probably going to be trading quite nicely into their 6-drops. If they do decide to trade into our 5/1, well, we've just saved 6 face damage by not doing the trade for them.
His deck. He wins the value game. He doesn't necessarily need an extra Tyrion, though Tyrion's a pretty good card, it has to be said.
I would take a spare Tyrion in most circumstances.
Yeah.
I think especially now Stan and Russia have seen Grimscale Chum, for example. They know, all right, this is a pretty aggressive Paladin we're up against. This isn't going to go the distance with Curator and Primordial Drake and all that madness. So if we probably just set out and beat these 5 or 6 cards that he has in hand, plus 2 or 3 more top decks, that's probably about the end of his gas in this game.
Right.
For the Paladin, you could have looked at Shaman's last turn and seen no Hex, and the rest of their turn was pretty weak, to be honest. So you could take that as a signal that they don't have a Hex in hand. So it's pretty safe to actually use the Spikeridge Steed here. Yes, you could potentially get punished by Devolve, but the rest of your plays look pretty weak anyway. So I think taking the Steed turn now is really good, and you can push face damage. If you play the 1-drop and the Kodo and your Bog Creeper does get hexed, they're going to trade into the Frog, you're going to get a Frog back into your hand, they're going to trade their 3/3 into your 1/3, and it's going to be a pretty poor result. If you get devolved, your 1-drop's going to turn into a Wisp, and they're going to make sure to trade into that first, and then you're going to get a Wisp back into your hand, which is again a pretty poor result. So given that you'll probably be in a good position if you don't get devolved or hexed, I like hero powering to play around those situations which turn out badly for you.
And Sigantag actually has a chance to really get a grip on the board here. The problem is with Spikeridge Steed is that it's so weak to devolve and hex. Blessing of Kings doesn't really make the Bog Creeper survive for long enough, so he is going to go with a Spike Ridge Steed. I like it a lot. And really, what's Devolve? Devolve gives him a 6-drop. 6 drops could be okay.
6 drops aren't brilliant overall, actually, if you look at the average stats per mana cost. It's actually one of the lowest value opportunities. Obviously, a 6 drop is still a decent chunk of stats.
Somewhere around 5-5, I'd say.
For Shaman's turn 8, Devolve looks pretty attractive, negating the Spike Ridge Steed of the opponent. We don't want to be really using Jade Lightning or Volcano here. We don't develop the board much of our own, and we leave our opponent with a 2-6 whilst expending some valuable resources of our own. With our remaining 6 mana, we're probably going to be playing Ire Blackpaw, depending on what comes out of this Devolve.
Yeah, it's I think maybe even a little bit lower than that. There's a lot of really nasty 6 drops.
That one's good.
That one's fine. Defias Cleaner, 5/7, silence a minion with Death Rattle.
Defias Cleaner, is it?
I think that's right.
I agree about Defias. You might be right. I don't know. I just. We'll look it up later.
In terms of dealing with this Wisp, I think I'd like to trade the 3/3 into it rather than sacrifice the 1/1. It opens up Consecration a little bit, but it's still not bad for us, so I don't think we should play around it.
I saw it being played in response to all the, ironically actually, all the Spike Ridge Steed being around.
We have a read that our opponent has no Hex, and board control is not looking too great for us right now, so I think the best play is to Kings our guy and push as much face damage as we can. The only question is what we do alongside that. We have 2 options really, one being Taunt and Kodo to sort of block the minions away from our guy and produce a lot of value with taunts. We could also play the 1-drop and Megasaur for more stats immediately onto the board. The problem with the Megasaur play is that they trade kind of poorly into the Ire and the War Leader, and it opens our board up to a potential Volcano, and then our hand's looking pretty miserable afterwards.
Right, because it's a card that can come down at that period of the game. It's a big body, 5/7, then silence a minion with Death Rattle. They jam Spike Ridge Steed on something, you slam it out. And I think it was actually Firebat that I saw messing around with it. And his whole chat was saying, well, why aren't you just playing Spellbreaker? Like, just play Spellbreaker, just play Spellbreaker. He's like, no, it's a 5/7, and most of the good silence targets are just Death Rattles anyway.
Sure.
Then he got Frost Nova Doomsayer and went, yeah, you know what, guys? It should be a Spellbreaker.
As for options for taunts, we're running out of resources, so mana efficiency isn't as much of a problem anymore. So I think I like taking the biggest, most value one here, which is Grime Street Protector. And also the 2 5-drop ones aren't too great anyway.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with you on the Defias half of its name.
Okay.
Blessing of Kings, though, is going to make it a 9/11. 6 mana 9/11 is not bad. You said 6 mana minions were bad, Soto. It's a 9/11.
Sorry, I forgot all about this giant pile of stats on 6 mana.
It's the last time I trust your stats.
Mm-hmm. What is the secret, by the way? Is it Kodo?
Yeah.
Okay.
For Shaman, I think this is the turn to Volcano. We don't want to be playing our taunts now, just to block off this 9/11. We leave the opponent with opportunities to come back with things like Sunkeep with Tarim, or to push through our taunts and find a lethal. If we play Volcano, Hero Power, Thing from Below this turn, we completely clear our opponent's board, put ahead on tempo, and with great follow-ups. If we play the taunts and they deal with them, then our follow-ups are pretty miserable. In terms of what the secret is, reads-wise, it's probably Kodo, given the opponent's reluctance to play it earlier. But luckily, given the board state, we can actually play around absolutely everything, and we do so by attacking with Ire first. If it's Noble Sacrifice, we can trade the 2/2 and the 3/3 into the 1/4, leaving the board with a total health of 15, allowing us for a very clean Volcano clear. If it's Redemption, we can kill the 1/1 with a minion and then trade the remaining minion into the 9/11 and then just Volcano. If it's Kodo, we can trade the 2/2 into the 9/11 and then push 3 face damage. And if nothing triggers, we probably don't want to attack face given our health total, just to play around Eye for an Eye. I can't imagine our opponent picks Eye for an Eye that often, but given our health total and the kind of irrelevance of the face damage we do to our opponent at this stage, I think just playing around the slim chance of it makes most sense.
So actually, despite being so far unfavored in the value game, Austria, even with such a weak start, have been able to push through so much potential damage here. And the Volcano is an available clear here for Stanadachi if he wants to go for it. With only a 3/3 Jade inside of that Aya, he can for sure guarantee that that we die on to kill the 9/11, right?
Yeah. Zingentag actually running out of time, but he's coming up with some pretty good stuff at the moment. Like his mid game has been solid, considering how this deck is clearly built for the early game. Though, the more turns go on, the better the situation is going to be for Stanadachi's naturally late game deck.
Interested as to how Stan's looking at this now. With the Blood Mage and Jade Lightning for 6 now, he can clear it out that way. If that first spell damage totem hadn't have landed, was he just intending to put the Jade Chieftain Taunt in the way and just hoping that was going to stick? Because the Volcano looked pretty promising, right? Like trading your minions in.
Stan rolled Spell Power Totem. I assume he was going to play Thing from Below to block this off, but he managed to get the Spell Power to kill it. The problem with this play is that you are on 6 health and you have no taunt in the way, so if your opponent has something like True Silver Consecration, True Silver Bluegill, or a buff Bluegill from like a War Leader, they could just lethal you on the spot. So I think this play is completely overly risky, and the Volcano was just such a huge swing turn anyway, with great follow-ups, that it seemed like the clear best play to me.
First to lower the health on the board. Volcano, you still have a 3/3 Jade left over, plus you can develop behind that. Like, that just seems like game over at that point.
For this turn, Finch is a great pickup. It might let you get back onto the board with your Megasaur afterwards. You may as well fill the rest of the turn with a Stonehill Defender as well. Yeah, the opponent's got spell damage on board. They've already used 2 Maelstrom Portals and a Storm. If they have the second Storm, whatever they win, you're in a losing position at this point. So we shouldn't be playing around what the opponent potentially could have, but just maximising our own chances.
Raven and I saw a similar strategy, though, that Stanadachi is doing right now, which is just keep Aya.
In terms of picks, actually sometimes, and I find myself doing it quite a lot, is picking Shield Bearer, because it has good synergy with Sunkeeper Tarim, being able to play a 1-drop and Tarim in the same turn. But this isn't really the case here. In terms of the other two, the Curator is just a better version of Twin Imps in this kind of deck, so it's the clear pick here, in my opinion.
For as long as possible. Don't let that Death Rattle pop, because that means that when there's an Equality Consecration, great, you clear most of the board.
This is a Grimscale Chum deck, though. Are you really scared of Equality Consecration?
Even like just Consecration on its own.
Sure.
The Jades aren't that big at the moment, but a Consecration would still allow Stanadachi to come out with a 4/4. Vinja, the Flying Star, is kind of difficult for Stanadachi.
It is.
He can't prevent it easily. I don't think he can prevent it at all, can he?
Well,
if he just plays Thing from Below, he can.
Again, Volcano is the big question mark, but this is a really messy Volcano to be throwing out just to kill Finja.
For Shaman's turn, actually, Volcano, just to kill a Finja, feels pretty attractive here as well. We can clear the board without killing off Aya, so we get the Death Rattle from her. And we can play both Totems and the Thing from Below, giving us complete board advantage, and really not giving the opponent any potential to swing back. If we leave Finja alive, the problem is there's been no Megasaurs been played so far, and no War Leaders been played either. So if they get the kill with the Finja, and then buff a really large board, we might be in a situation where we have to Volcano that anyway, but we've expended a lot of our taunts, and a lot of our own minions of our own. Additionally, if they adapt to get Death Rattle or Divine Shield, it can be very hard to clear, and things like Sunkeeper Tarim become a problem for us as well. Given that our opponent has used 2 Stonehill Defenders and have 2 unknown taunts in their hand, either one of them could be Tarim. So kind of as sad as using Volcano just to kill a Finja looks here, I think it really is actually the best play. We have just so much value in hand that we can afford to use a low value Volcano just to stop the potential of our opponent getting out of control.
Gonna cycle the Blood Mage here, see what he picks up. Volcano number 2.
The difficult thing is, if Stan wants to prevent Finja from going off, then he needs to just play Thing from Below and no other taunts. That means he can't use his hero power. Because if he goes with that line and rolls a Taunt Totem, then Finja's going to proc anyway.
Sure. He's at 6 health, so from Zygenteig's side, once he trades in, if he gets a Bluegill Warrior, which could be in the deck since it's, you know, the aggressive version with Grimscale Charm, then Megasaur, even with +3 attack, isn't enough to force through lethal, so it would have to be Bluegill plus a buff plus Megasaur to even push through, and those are the kind of outs you're looking at in this situation because of the fact that, like, hey, right now...
Just a small thing, but I don't think you should really be hero powering here. The chance of getting a taunt is obviously bad because you give Finja a very easy target to kill, and additionally if the board does get out of control and you do need a Volcano, then you've just added health to the board that you don't really want. So you want to make sure the Volcano does clear, and adding additional health to the board is going against that.
You're in a mess as Russia, a mess in Austria because you've lost the board so definitively in your board snowball deck, so you are having to try and find just creative ways to end the game.
Well, there's that consecration we were talking about earlier, and that is actually going to allow Zygenteig to trade Finja into the 4/4 Jade Golem and then get his Murlocs.
In this situation, as the Paladin, it's very clear that we're quite far behind, and this Finja's got to do some work for us to win. The only question is whether we want to use Consecration this turn to clear off some of the opponent's board, or generate 2 extra minions by not using it. Consecration kills off some totems and it allows us to trade into the 4/4, but in a control shaman the totems really don't do anything at all, so I don't really like missing out on the extra 1/1s. Given we're in such a bad situation, I think one of the best ways to regain tempo and potentially win is to use Consecration, trade Finja into the 4/4, pulling a Murloc War Leader, which will keep Finja alive. We can then adapt for Wind Fury and then trade again into the thing from below, giving us a huge board and a potential to win the game. Realistically, any other sort of line is just going to be dealt with easily, or we're going to be lethaled by our opponent very quickly. So I kind of like using the Consecration now, go for that really high roll potential, given this kind of bad situation we're in right now. If we brick on the Wind Fury, we can go for something like Divine Shield, Health, or Death Rattle. It's probably the line we'd gone for if we made a wide board and didn't use the Consecration anyway, so the opportunity of cost of this potentially game-winning high roll isn't actually that high. Additionally, by killing this 4/4, we could play around the opponent having an immediate lethal with Jade Claws or Jade Lightning, although given we're so far behind, playing around 2 cards doesn't really make too much sense. It's just a small benefit.
Problem is, well, what Murlocs?
Well, it does mean now, let's say, if Finja pulls double Bluegill Warrior,
That'd be insane.
then you can Megasaur for plus attack, or +3, and then 1 will trade through the 5/5 taunt, the other 2 taunts will be dead to the Consecration, and the remaining 5 damage will be lethal to face after it takes 2. So there's a tiny out on 1, there being Bluegill Warriors in the deck, 2, that entire sequence of RNG happening in Austria's favour, and 3, no.
Austria didn't even play into it, though. They didn't start with the Consecration. They opted to just trade away the taunt.
Yeah, like I said, there might not even be Bluegills in the deck,
That
right?
might not be.
Yeah.
He's going for a really wide Murloc board now. It looks like it's Gentle Megasaur time. I'm curious as to which adaptation he's going to want to get from this. Goes with the Divine Shield very quickly. Looks like that's what he was looking for.
For Shaman, we can clean up the board with Storm and then play Mana Tide and heal ourselves with Jinyu behind that. We don't really want to use Hex here, just in case we need it for like a Tyrion or something down the line, if our opponent does manage to deal with our remaining board.
And Standard actually doesn't care because he can clear the board.
5, 9, 14, 19. He also has 22 damage to face himself right now. And no damage from hand to follow it up. But yeah, various combinations of these AoE effects in hand and on-board trades, however he wants to take it, will put an end to this madness very quickly.
This game is definitely showing one of the weaknesses of Volcano, though, as we've seen that first one in Standardacci's hand for a very long time. Second one there too. If you've already got the board, it's not going to allow you to just deal with your opponent's threats. You have to rely on the board you've already got to do that. That being said, if you've already got the board, do you really need it anyway?
Yeah, I mean that is the best kind of card, right? It's if it's only not good when you're already winning and you still win those games anyway, then fine, you will play that card a lot of the time. But I do agree with your sentiment. It's why I question that turn where he could have, use the Volcano on the... I'm going to keep calling it Defias Cleaner, even though you've put the doubt in my mind now.
It might be Defias
in
Cleaner.
In that turn where there was the 11 health Defias, and he could have traded in first and then Volcanoed and still had the Death Rattle Jade from his Aya come down afterwards. He still could have developed Thing from Below alongside that on the same turn, as well as I think like Blood Mage or Totem or whatever else he wanted to do. That felt like the turn that said, hey, we're going to have the board for the rest of the game now, so let's use this Volcano while we can.
Paladin rips the only out that can really keep them in the game here with the second Consecration. You just play both of them here and you're kind of in a alright spot.
Not that it's mattered, because he has ended up in pretty comfortable control of this game regardless.
Yeah, Volcano, the opposite of a win more card. However, Spirit Echo, pretty much the definition of one. As Stanodachi's board gets completely annihilated by 2 Consecrations. Unfortunately, that Spirit Echo, which for a moment there looked like it was the perfect draw, now is somewhat useless.
Honestly, it's fine. At this point, Hot Spring and Spirit Echo here seems perfectly reasonable to me.
Yeah, that being said, Second Tag's going to be able to play the Curator next turn.
For Shaman, using Hot Spring Hero Power is good here. You don't really want to use Spirit Echoes. It's likely your board's going to survive for the next turn anyway, and you're going to have the mana to spare. So why not get an extra Hero Power in and potentially draw another minion that you might want to Spirit Echoes next turn.
Restock his hand and actually get the aggression going once more. I don't think that Stanodachi is completely out of the woods just yet.
Does that mean there is going to be a Primordial Drake in his Grimscale Chum deck?
For Paladin, the 6/6 taunt and the 4/6 taunt trade pretty much similarly on this board, so you may as well play the 4/6 taunt and draw more resources in your deck, so you can potentially have a better next turn.
I mean, we've seen stranger things.
Oh, okay, he took it off Stonehill. That's fair. Sorry, my bad.
Alright, okay.
Yeah, so just Murloc and Beast, no Dragon being thrown in. It's not a natural Curator from the deck. I missed the fact that he picked it up from Stonehill,
as well.
Which makes a lot more sense. I was about to question every last element of my sanity.
Oh, wow. Pretty much exactly what Stanodachi needs right now. He can play the Jade Chieftain and then just drop the Spirit Echo.
For Shaman's turn, you really want to be cleaning up these Murlocs. You've just seen the opponent draw from this Curator, so it's incredibly likely they have a Megasaur in hand. Additionally, they haven't played any War Leaders so far this game, so the chances of them drawing one are increasingly getting higher and higher. A lot of people want to save Hexes for Tyrions, particularly that the opponent has played a Stonehill Defender and has a minion in hand that they haven't played. But if a Hex is good, you should just use it. And in this situation, the Hex is very good. It prevents the 4/6 from value trading into your 2/4. It allows you to get through that taunt and value trade into the 2/2 Murloc. And given that you know that your opponent is likely to have a Megasaur in hand, clearing Murlocs right now should be your priority. If our opponent were to drop Tyrion, it's not even particularly good. When you're so far behind on board, Tyrion just pretty much amounts to a 6/7 taunt, and our Jades are going to be so big that the Ashbringer that he gets isn't really going to be able to do anything. So I really like taking the immediate Hex value here. Getting the value trades in is just so good, and we can prevent our opponent from snowballing these Murlocs.
The only question he has to ask is he safe on 11 health with this play? He ends up with a 6/6 taunt and a 2/4 taunt. What beats him? Does Gentle Megasaur ever beat him?
Is it 6/6 for sure?
I believe so.
Because, so if he Hero Powers, say he's playing around like Hero Power Megasaur, right? Hero Power Megasaur into +3 damage is 6 damage exactly on that Tidecaller. So the difference between 5 or 6 or 7, whatever the Jades are at, are actually a very big deal in this position. It turns out that, you know, from Austria's perspective, they have War Leader plus Hero Power plus Megasaur, so the numbers actually get huge, so they can really break through any kind of board presence that is thrown up here if Stern doesn't deal with these Murlocs on board. But from Russia's perspective, they might be playing around more realistic combinations, right? There's 3 cards in hand. We've already seen 1 Megasaur get used. Have we seen a War Leader get played yet? I don't think so. No. So it's fairly reasonable for them to have 1 of those cards in hand at this point. But 2 would seem unlikely, and there is a potential big punish coming out now.
Yeah, well, if this play doesn't lose Stanodachi the game, then it probably wins him the game.
For the rest of the game, the plays are fairly automatic, and I don't think I'd need to go into too much detail into them, and I think the casters do a good job of explaining them anyway. So enjoy the rest of the game.
You look very...
War Leader, Seer,
Don't even know the
and
word.
Megasaur
But that's-
all in the same turn.
That's a lot of Murloc synergy.
The War Leader buffs the Tycaller here immediately to 5, which, as I said, this is one of the reasons why that being a 6/6 was so important, because just War Leader into Grime Street Protector would have been insane against a 5/5 Jade Taunt. Against a 6/5, he needs to keep going. Against a 6/6, he needs to keep going with the buffs. Taunt, Divine Shield, and 1/1 plants are the offers. Divine Shield will do just fine, but these volcanoes are going to start to now pay off big, potentially, for Standardachi.
Are we about to see a double volcano in one turn? I think it's possible.
Have you not seen this before? I've seen this happen before.
No, I don't think so.
Interesting. You sweet summer child.
But that is the comeback Standardachi needs. I said a moment ago, if he doesn't lose from that play, he quite possibly wins from it. He gets an extra Jade Chieftain, an extra heal, an extra 6-mana 6/6.
So 4, 8, 13 health on the left-hand side of the board, 16 with the 3 Divine Shields, 21, 25, 29. 29 just on Austria's side of the board, plus the additional 10 on Stan's side of the board. Of course, those numbers can subtract from each other quite nicely because you can make those trades in first to reduce the numbers. So yes, short answer, double Volcano is going to be a clear here. If that's the line Stan decides to go with.
Double Volcano will overload him for 4 next turn, meaning he's got 6 mana. That's kind of awkward. It means he can't play the Jade Chieftain next turn. He could just play a 6 mana 6/6 next turn. He could play Jade Claws, which is a 2 mana 7/7.
Actually, is it? Because the 5/5 can't actually trade very effectively. The 5/5 attacking in just like this will already take 8 health off the board. Then you can take 3 more off with the Jinyu. So yeah, it works just fine.
Yeah.
Volcano Mats is so annoying. It's one of my least favorite things to have to do while playing Hearthstone.
Not one of the things that comes up that often on the ladder, though. In these tournaments, where the shaman is very relevant, and sure, but not the most popular ladder deck at the moment.
It's fair. This is now pretty much, I believe, the last hurrah here for Zeeg and Teague. Both Hero Power, Grime Street Protector, and Rockpool Hunter, Grime Street Protector basically develop the same amount of power. If the 1/1 sticks, then it can be buffed the next turn to attack for 2 anyway. So I expect, yeah, this just looks like the slightly more flexible play. And this is, yet again, setting up lethal, but it's fairly easy to realize it's not because you know that there are various cards Spirit Echoed back to your opponent's hands right now.
Yep, Hot Spring Guardian, as was already hovered over, is probably the most relevant here. Hex is there if Standard actually needs it, though I don't think we've seen a Tyrion yet. And
we have not.
Hex is much more likely to want to find that as a target. Junior Water Speaker, playable as well, setting Standardachi back up to 14, which doesn't put up a taunt, so it's not completely safe, but he could pair that with the Jade Claws, once again putting a 7/7 on the board. It's just... Russia have been on the edge, so close to losing for the last few turns in a row. This is sort of the last little bit of danger. After the next turn, I'd say that Standardachi is completely out of the woods. And in a much safer place.
Yeah. I mean, basically, ever since that turn where they were 2 damage off lethal, when they had like 24 damage on board against 26 health or whatever, but couldn't do any damage because they're a puny control deck. Ever since that turn, they've kind of just been scrambling. It's like, all right, let's just live this turn. All right, let's just live next turn. Just trying to find solutions to problems turn by turn. There's a lot more forward planning going into that than it sounds, but they are just trying to survive at the moment on a case-by-case basis. And Austria just keeps getting these draws that just gives them that fraction of hope every single turn.
Yeah, Russia playing it very safe there with that Hex. Arguably wasting it before Tyrion comes out, but seemed like it was necessary.
You just don't play around Tyrion when your opponent has no cards in their hand. It's just, you know, if Hex is the best play on board, you...
Just to note this turn that Stan could have played around a Tarim lethal by playing Jinyu Water Speaker this turn instead of the taunts, but he opens himself up to a War Leader lethal anyway, and given they're both equally likely, and the fact that you might still lose to Tarim anyway if you play around War Leader, I like just playing the taunts here instead of the heals.
Like, playing around top decks is generally a route to madness in Hearthstone.
And now this is a pretty nice board that Stanodachi
Solid.
is conjuring up there. 7-7, 8-8, and 5-5.
Tarim is lethal, though.
What just happened?
I told this deck just gets there, dude. You build your deck to do one thing, it does it. You kill people. That's what happens.
That is quite
That's insane.
unbelievable. Both Pavel and Stanodachi have been toppled so far by Team Austria.
The look on Stan's face right now, he is disgusted. I mean, that game, yes, those last few chain of draws from Austria were incredible. But that game, there was so many decisions as to how to be defensive from Russia's position. I guarantee you, if we go back through that with a fine-tooth comb, there was something that Russia could have done to be safer.
I hope you enjoyed episode 3 of Analyse the Pros. This game was interesting in that it featured a lot of misuse of fundamentals for the paladin and Shaman's reluctance to use Volcano in the mid-game to really push a tempo advantage. I hope some of the advice was useful to you, and if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe or like or comment. I'll be happy to discuss any of the turns with you in the comments. But yeah, see you next time.